Hey folks, Jeff Salzman here, and welcome to another episode of The Shrink and the Pundit, where I, Jeff, the pundit, talk to my old pal, Dr. Keith Witt, the shrink, about all things integral. Or maybe better put, we talk about all things through the lens of integral theory, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
That's it. That's exactly it.
Through the which posits that consciousness and culture evolve. So we're looking at everything through that lens.
That's right.
Something like that. Well, today we're going to talk about two topics actually that are up in the culture big time. And they're both really fraught with all kinds of implications. And I think really integral helps us to sort it out. Mm-hmm. And the two topics are gender fluidity and abortion. So, well, let's start with gender fluidity, Keith. Put something on the table and let's go from there.
One of the reasons I was looking forward to this is there's three sets of perspectives that all intersect, but they all have different emphasis. I mean, one is how does this all fit in with the evolution of consciousness and culture and stuff? Second, this is clearly part of a political process that is getting scarier and scarier for progressives. I mean, I guess it's scarier for conservatives too. It's hard to say.
Well, let me just stop to differentiate that. How would you see this? What would we call it? An awakening of gender fluidity, or the further evolution of sex roles? How would you see that as threatening to progressives?
Well, what's threatening to progressives is the idea that, and incredibly provocative. One, the idea that one group of people would actively attack parents and clinicians and kids trying to find a way through a very difficult area. I mean, Green has such antibodies to that, okay? And so that lights a lot of outrage and distress and so on. And then the very real fear that Green has of fascism, that the wider the swing, I admit it, I get all happy when the culture swings over towards, we're gonna take care of everybody, we're gonna have generative capitalism, and we're gonna have people paying attention to the beautiful, good, and true, and everybody will be world-centric. So I get all relaxed and happy over on that end. But it swings over to the other end, and it's like it's getting closer to fascism. And fascism freezes a culture. So what happens in fascism is first somebody takes over. Then they attack some subpopulation, Jews, gays, hippies, whatever. Then they somehow get enough of the power structure and the people to sign on to those attacks, that everybody gets all excited about marginalizing and attacking some group. And then as that progresses, it turns into aggression outward to other groups and other countries. And then it results in eventually some kind of external constraint. Somehow people who don't want to be invaded or don't want to have, their transgender people locked up or something will push back, kind of like the world's pushing back on Putin right now. And so we've seen this endlessly throughout human history. Now, one great thing about evolution is the current incarnation of that in the world is way less violent than it used to be, even though we have a World War II type war going on in Ukraine. But it's scary. And I mean, I don't know if it's possible that there could be a real fascist takeover of the United States. I doubt it. Yeah. I mean, but when it gets closer over there, then Green gets, and Teal, gets scared. So there's that part of it. So there's that part of it. There's the anger that you feel when people are being sacrificed for a political gain. It makes me want to cry. And then there's kind of my wheelhouse, which is I want to understand and help people. The understanding and helping people part of gender is pretty great right now in a lot of ways.
Gray.
No, great.
Great.
Okay. In terms of just the state of the knowledge and the sophistication of practitioners and the level of permission on cultural levels in a lot of cultural enclaves, it's never been better. And I'll give you, let me explain. So baby's born, right? Okay, so baby doesn't know whether it's a boy or a girl, but it's assigned a gender, boy or girl. At 14 months, the little kid discovers whether they're a boy and a girl they start realizing there's a difference. Okay, they grow into that difference with all the cultural baggage and the physiological, genetic, imperatives of being a boy or a girl. And then 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, they get more or less comfortable with the gender assignment they have. And with a certain percentage, tiny percentage, somewhere between 1 and 2%, or 0.6 and maybe 1.8% of the population, they go, wait a minute, I'm not really a boy, I'm a girl. I'm not really a girl, I'm a boy. So historically, this has not been a very great thing for little kids discovering this, okay? So historically, mostly if a kid starts going in this direction, they get slammed by the patriarchy, and because patriarchy hates this. Last 50 or 60 years, 70 years, things have been changing. Now, parents take this seriously, a lot of parents. There was one study on 317 kids who, on an average age of 6.5, they socially transitioned into the other sex. By socially transition, the girls wore boy stuff and did boy stuff, and the boys wore girl stuff, did girl stuff. And these kids were followed. And then they were upper middle class kids. 2/3 of them were white. I mean, it was a skewed sample. 2/3 were boys to girls. And they followed them for 5 years. 5 years later, 98% of them liked the new gender that they'd chosen. It was a stable phenomenon. Okay? And also they were doing well. They were psychologically healthy. They were in supportive families. Of the 2.5% that changed their minds, I think there was 8 kids, like 3 or 4 changed their minds. Parents said, sure, fine, change your mind, go back. And they went back, and they apparently no psychological distress. And 2 or 3 of the kids says, we want to be a non-binarians. And then parents said, sure. Now they're going to follow these kids another 20 years, and we'll see. But the beauty of this particular study is it shows that if a human being decides that they want to be another gender, and they start doing it at this particular age, seems to work out pretty well. With adolescents, there's a lot of adolescents that decide, and adolescence is 9 to 23. Okay, puberty is 3 years in there beginning. The adolescence is a long time. With adolescents, the kids that self-identify as transgender, there was a study on 19 schools, and 1.8% of the kids identified as transgender, which amazed the researchers. They thought at most it would be 0.6%. It was 3 times higher than they thought, 2.5 times higher than they thought it would be. And part of that is, and I've been noticing this with teenagers I've been working with, and with parents, it's a lot more socially acceptable for a kid to be trans, bi, or gender fluid. It's actually, in some schools, it's kind of like a cool thing, which, I mean, coming from the 50s and the 60s, this is like, whoa, this is like Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's court territory in terms of a cultural shift. Yep. And there's been a lot of people that have worked with these kids. There's one psychologist, Andy Anderson, who transitioned herself when she was 57. And she's worked with lots and lots of these kids. And these kids will go to clinics. In 2007, there was one clinic in the United States that helped these kids transition. Now there's 60 of them. Okay? And there's a whole culture now. There's a world organization, a US organization for transgender health, and there's controversy in that. The people on the extreme end of that say, why should kids have to be psychologically evaluated to transition? You don't have to be psychologically evaluated to be straight. Well, that's kind of a good point, but practically speaking, if a teenager says, I want to, yesterday I was fine being a boy and now today I want to be a girl, you probably want to slow it down a little bit and kind of evaluate that. And Annie Anderson works in San Francisco. She said that recently there have been, interestingly, a lot of female to male girls, teenagers who have other issues, anxiety, depression, autism, who had decided suddenly in a way that they want to transition. And Andy Anderson is fine with kids transitioning, but says, hey, let's take some time with these kids. Let's work with them, maybe let them encourage them to socially transition, but let's slow down on the hormones and the surgery. Now, the transition part involves first the social transition, wear clothes, self-identify. Second, hormonal treatments that shift your development or that shift your body's biochemistry more towards the other gender. Then there's surgery that makes you look more like what you want to do. If I wanted to transition today, I would want to get rid of my Adam's apple and maybe have breasts and that kind of stuff. And then sometimes sexual reassignment surgery where you turn penises into vaginas and vaginas into penises. And the World Organization says we don't think you should start a hormone treatment until 14 or do chest surgery until 15 or do gender reassignment until 17, and that kids should be evaluated. Okay? And there's some controversy there. There's one person in England who got pissed off at 23 that she had been helped by this clinic to transition. She said she wasn't adequately evaluated. And so this is a genuine controversy in the community, the trans community, but generally everybody is going, sure, we're for people being the gender that they want to be in.
Well, yeah, let me just stop there because that's, I have to say, that a lot of what you were saying here, and I'll take the position of the horrified person on the right, is
Sure.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
Absolutely, just horrifying. This idea, and I think it's actually part of the pernicious, maybe even part of the patriarchy. The idea that if I'm not a girl, I have to be a boy.
Yeah.
I have to have a mastectomy. No, maybe, but the social contagion of this right now is very frightening. The idea of becoming a medical case for the rest of your life, basically, especially with these bottom surgeries.
That's true.
And with the hormones, I mean, I think this is at the level of lobotomies. I think we're going to look back on this as at the level of lobotomies when it's completely unnecessary. Why don't you just be you? When I was a kid growing up in the Steel Valley, I was a little gay kid. I absolutely wanted to play with the girls. I wasn't allowed. I didn't. I did my best with the boys, but I would have played with the girls. If that would have been okay, that would have been, I think I would be a better person today.
Yeah.
If that was able to happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that this is where I'm all in on every little kid gets to be, who he is or she is or it is or, whatever. But
they is very popular.
The other thing is, this idea of kids don't know who they are and they're assigned a gender. They also have penises and vaginas and chromosomes.
Yeah.
And let's factor that in. I just want to factor that in. So this is, this is my sort of blowback to some of, how you're putting it, Keith. I got to say.
Well, great. Okay, good. So let's dive into that a little bit. Okay. I go, okay, what creates the happiest, healthiest human beings? And what do we do about this and other sexual things to create happy, healthy human beings? Where's the data about that? Well, one great thing about the cornucopia of knowledge, I think you mentioned 8 or 9 years ago, Wolochowski's
The law of the infinite cornucopia.
The law of the infinite cornucopia. I have quoted you so many times on that. Anyway.
Just what it is, in case people don't know,
oh, good point.
it's this idea put forth by this philosopher in the 70s that at this point in our American, or in human history, there's so much information available to us that we can make whatever argument we want to make for whatever reason we want to make it. And we would have data and stuff. We have dots to connect to make that work.
That's true. Now, that being said, there is really good data about how you educate children, and education is a weak word, how you help children develop psychosexually. And there's really good data about a way of developing them psychosexually where they have way more problems, and a way of helping them develop psychosexually where they have way fewer problems throughout life. And we have two great examples of that in the Netherlands and in the United States. It's so,
okay,
70 years ago, the Netherlands said, hey, look, let's put psychologists in charge of sex education. I mean, why not? I mean, this has to be their area and everything. I mean, I got to admit, as a psychologist, I'm going, well, finally, somebody's giving us just a little love, okay?
I just feel the redneck in me say, what?
Yeah. What?
Give this to psychologists? Are you kidding me? Like,
Are you kidding me? And in 1981, Jeremiah Denton and Orrin Hatch proposed the Adolescent Family Life Act of 1981, that mandated abstinence-based education, sex education in the United States, that basically said, you have to do propaganda to these kids to get them to not have sex. You can't talk about masturbation or contraception or abortion. All you gotta do, you can tell them the biology and then say, don't do it, okay? So we have two different systems, all right? Okay, so now the Dutch system, because it can grow, because it's not frozen. The Dutch system grew. They started teaching 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds about the birds and the bees and about, being sex positive, and, you can play with your friends as long as it's all consensual and everything. And then 3rd graders, they told them about how to be nice to your crush. And then when they got to 6th and 7th grade, they told them about gender stuff and, and gender fluidity and homosexuality and lesbian and, all that stuff. And what kind of sex do you like? And when was a good time to do it? And then when they're and the parents are involved on this at every level. And then when they're teenagers and they have somebody that they care about, the family knows about it. That if they want to have sex, they do it in the open. And generally, and then in the United States, all abstinence-based, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, US kids and Dutch kids start having sex around 17 or 18. Okay, there's the only similarity. Now, the United States kids, they have 5 times more abortions, 5 times more teen pregnancies. If you take all the kids under 24 in the United States, that's 50% of the new STIs, sexually transmitted illnesses. You take those kids in the Netherlands, that's 10%. The kids in the Netherlands say, my first sexual experience was somebody I cared a lot about, and it was great. United States, it was hurried, I regretted it afterwards, 50% of it. Usually drugs or alcohol were involved. In other words, conspicuous success over here in the Netherlands, abysmal, dismal failure. God bless Barack Obama. Barack Obama started a program to stop teens pregnancy that borrowed from the Netherlands, okay? All right, so teen pregnancy went down dramatically during those 8 years. Okay, as soon as Trump got elected, he told all those people, no, we're back to 1981, abstinence-based, and teen pregnancy skyrocketed, okay? Went up.
Not true. I need statistics to bear that one out.
Sure.
I mean, I mean, my understanding is teen pregnancies are down, just period. And, I don't know why Trump being elected would skyrocket them, honestly.
Well, okay.
I don't remember anything about it. And also,
skyrocketing was an exaggeration.
the abstinence thing It's like these people were fighting against the onslaught of post-modernity, these poor people in Utah, and
Facts.
and they still are, you
Oh
know.
yeah.
Uh, and um, and so, first of all, I understand where they're coming from.
Mhm.
Secondly, I all for the sex permissive. I think the Scandinavian system is way better. I think being sex positive for kids as they grow up, being gender supportive. I draw the line at medical intervention, unless maybe an extreme case. I don't know. But and then also this idea that things get frozen. No, they're not. I mean, look at the attitudes in Utah versus now versus 50 years ago.
So that's the thing that is the most validating to me as an evolutionary.
Yes.
I mean, what's most validating to me, even everything that happens that's bad, that's happened before, including the internal corruption of the empire and everything, is happening less violently and more out in the open than it ever did before. And I'm excited about that. But I want to make one comment about the biology stuff, okay?
Okay.
Look, the way that this works is there's a kid who says, I want to be a girl, okay? And so he talks to his parents. They take him to a therapist who's sex positive therapist. They go, okay, well, let's talk about it. So they work on it, and so this is consistent. The kid doesn't have any other psychological problems. The kid is distressed by the emergent secondary sex characteristics. And so the parents consult with a clinic. And the kids goes, okay, I've been socially transitioned for a couple of years now. I'm going to do hormone replacement, which is generally reversible, though there are a couple of side effects. Okay. Now, I think probably now I've worked with families who've done this. Okay.
I'm sure you have.
And generally, and with kids who want to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and generally the place where it plays out, at least in Santa Barbara, is the parents go, it's fine with us if you socially transition. It's fine with us if you look into the possibilities. But in general, they wait until the kid's 18 and go, okay, now if you're still convinced and you want to do what you do, and you've been evaluated and consistent and taking care of other stuff, you can make that decision and we will support you. Okay. The fact that the world trans group says 14 for hormones and 15 for top surgery and 17 as minimums means that they recognize that there's some times when families and clinicians and doctors get together and go, this kid really wants to transition. And so he's the exception or she's the exception. In fact, Annie Anderson, the person that I like so much, got in a lot of trouble with that organization because she said these girls that want to transition into boys, they just discovered it a couple of months ago and so on. She says we should not rush into anything biological with them until there's been a series of engagement with them, both with the trans community and with
at a minimum. I mean, the idea that there is one detransitioner is crazy. There's I don't know how many detransitioners, but there's a big detransitioner group on Reddit that I think it's 10,000 people. And these are people who have horrible stories about the psychological contagion of this trans ideology that I get the fruitfulness of it. That's why I did my podcast, Fruitful and Fanatic, like everything. Every history, it's fruitful and fanatic.
And there's data that supports that, Jeff.
That supports what?
It supports the fact that as the culture says it's fine to be gender fluid, it becomes fashionable. Kids who are incredibly influenced by other kids will start leaning into, well, I'm bisexual, I'm gender fluid. Yes. Now, as long as you're not doing biochemical or surgical interventions, go.
Yes. And I would argue that if there really was a sex positive, welcome to the world of everything, kid.
That's true.
That kid wouldn't necessarily say, I want to be a girl. What he would say would be, I want to play with dolls. That's me. I didn't think about being a girl. I like my penis. you
Uh-huh.
know. But I wanted to do things with the girls. I wanted to be pretty. I wanted to wear dresses. I did. And if I had been allowed, I'm not sure I would have wanted to actually surgically transition. Again, I think this is a hangover from the patriarchy, or basically human history, where sex roles were, male and female. It's that polarity even of masculine and feminine.
Well, I'm
But
aware of that, but be aware as you talk, there's a subtext of, I want to take choices away from certain people. Okay. Now, I believe that in the field right now, there's at least for the serious practice, for the psychologists, and for the people who work with people, the practitioners, okay, of extreme conservatism. And so I'm all for socially transition, try whatever you want and decide what you want, but let's slow down on the biological interventions. But I know that there's infinite variability with people, and I don't think that taking that choice away from kids and parents and professionals and doctors who are spending a lot of time working in this field and figuring this stuff out, and saying once in a while there's a teenager where it makes sense for them to transition,
Yep.
taking away those choices because you have a position of, well, I wouldn't want to get rid of my penis, or I don't want to get rid of my edge.
No, totally, Keith. You're totally right, and I don't mean to imply that subtext. I do think that there's a zone of choice and privacy that people ought to have. I do think that it's just the nature of evolution. There's this realization of gender fluidity, and it becomes an ideology that has to be used to explain the world, and it doesn't even realize its own gender binaries. That
I'm with
is,
you on that. I really am.
we need to notice that, and that any kid that is going to take this seriously in terms of the medical, again, they ought to read a bunch of detransitioner stories and YouTubes. There's I don't know, I want to say thousands. There's certainly more than I could watch.
Well, a high bar is great.
Yes.
A high bar, sure, keep the bar super, and especially keep the bar high for kids under 18.
Yeah.
Now, and also part of that high bar is exactly what you're talking about. Be educated. Read the stories of people that had a horrible time with it, as well as the other stories, and talk to experts about it and explore your own development and all that stuff.
Yeah. And in the meantime, be who you are. And I think every kid I don't know, every kid, there's probably just these males and females that come out and that's who they are. But I think every kid would benefit from playing around. For Christ's sake, kids now they're going to live to be 140. You expect them to be one sex that whole time? No.
Also,
I think this is, we're going to be, our grandchildren are going to be as different from us as we are from our grandparents. And I think that's we don't even know what that looks like.
Absolutely. Second of on that now, pulling this into everything, when it hits over into like not letting women have abortions, okay? Mm-hmm. And now interestingly, of all the conservative, dog whistles, this is the one that I kind of have the most empathy for.
Right.
I mean, I am absolutely for a lot women having the right to choose. Becky chose to have an abortion when she got pregnant in her 40s. And I had to go with her and scare away, some asshole who was standing outside, wanting to intimidate her. Okay. But you know what? As soon as the egg is fertilized, it's a little human being. I'm sorry. I'm not going to do any, I'm not going to bullshit about that. And so am I saying I think women should have a right to murder a fetus? Yeah, I think they should have that right. Do I think they should have a right to murder a kid after the second trimester or even the first trimester, unless there's some big problem? No, I don't. And you know what? That's totally an irrational position. So,
well, I'd say it's a post-rational position, actually, Keith. And I totally agree with you. I think it's a trans-rational position because there is a certain, what comes on with rationality and modernity is that there has to be, and I think the Supreme Court has basically gotten it right so far. And that is that there's just this zone of privacy that we have to give each other in these moral situations. I see a baby at fertilization. They don't see a baby at fertilization. We can't colonize each other. We just have to sort of have a willful blindness about it and let each other do their thing. Same with pornography, same with contraception, same with, relationships, gay marriage, all of that. That's all protected by that reading of the Constitution. And I think that's been relatively good. I'm not sure that there is an evolution beyond that, in the sense that I think that one of the things that has happened in terms of cultural evolution around this issue of abortion, conception, and so forth, is I think people are more aware of the humanity of the fetus than they used to be. I mean, I remember in the 70s when abortion was made legal, it was like I helped a couple of my girlfriends get abortions. I didn't think anything of it. They didn't really either. And I'm not sure that's great. I think there's more, in terms of the evolution of consciousness. It's just like, what do you include? How much bigger can you go and include? And there's an inclusion of this developing human that's new and it's self-developing.
Becky said she felt like there was a soul leaving her body.
Yes.
And
yes.
And so we did ceremony around it, around that. Oh, and I do think that there is another level of development. And personally, weirdly, I think that level of development it kind of reflects something that David Brooks wrote in a recent op-ed. I don't know, not an op-ed. He's in an article he wrote, where he said that it's good for us to have individual rights, but we should have some common values and standards. And for instance, I think it should be a common value and standard that everybody over 18 vote in this country. I think that everyone who is over 18 should feel a responsibility to vote.
Did I just read that Australia requires one of these developed countries requires everybody to vote?
I think it's Australia.
It's a thing, I think.
Yeah,
but I'm with you.
Okay, so that's a common, that's a shared standard. I think another shared standard is that everyone, we have it in California, everyone needs to participate when there's an environmental problem that we all share. So everyone in California has had to cut down on our water usage over the last 10 years. Everybody. And to a large extent, everybody says, we understand, we're participating in that. Now, we don't have quite the same with carbon emissions. Conservatives now are in certain states are punishing companies for having low carbon standards and so on. So that's becoming something. But I think eventually a shared standard of we want to reduce the carbon in the greenhouse gases and support the change in human climate change. Plastic. We all want to get the plastic out of the ocean.
Yes.
We all want children to be respected and cherished and not abused or neglected. These are all shared standards. I think of that as we evolve, there's a point where we can feel united as Americans with all these democracy, a shared standard of having a democratic system. So I think that's the next level beyond this individual right thing that has been expanding with the liberation movements.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I sometimes ponder it, what's this going to look like? And it's funny because I was thinking about, as we integrate this idea of a woman's rights, of just a human right to privacy in some of these areas, and also this, re-enchanted world where, life is precious and there's a spark there, and there is every, chromosome is there, and there's a destiny, and to honor that. So I was thinking, well, maybe at some point we would have, there would be Gloria Steinem talked about if men had abortions or men got pregnant, abortion would be a sacrament.
Well, how about this?
But I'm saying that it would be a sacrament, actually, that there would be what Becky did, which is just an acknowledgement of it, and something that's not just cutting this out of my body and
Well, first of all,
not regarding that humanity there.
well, let's talk about that for just a second, because there's two things about that stand out to me. One, all the anti-abortion stuff has been, they help a woman like a 15-year-old or 16-year-old have a baby, and then they go, hey, bye. She goes, now what do I do?
I know.
Okay, so how about if we're going to encourage women to have one thing we can agree on is babies should be taken care of. Yep. And so if somebody has a baby and they can't adequately take care of it, that we give them the society's support so that that baby has a nurturing environment within a low stress environment. The second thing, now that we have genetic testing, is to make, if a woman has a baby, whoever fathered that baby now has for the next 18 years has fiduciary responsibility to support that child. Okay. Now, if that was put into law, which is totally fine, there's two parents, right? He had to decide to have the orgasm inside her, right? If he's just
a decision.
Well, we're getting phenomenological here.
I'm just my filthy mind.
Keith and Jeff start getting phenomenological about their orgasms. Yeah, we're on the left quadrants now. Okay. Anyway, so say that became the law of the land. Okay. Well, I wonder if the attitudes towards abortion would begin to shift a little bit, and also towards responsibility about birth control begin to shift a little bit if she can show a genetic test, and then you're on the hook for 18 years of paying the costs of raising a child.
Yeah.
Okay. Not to mention psychological engagement as the kid's father.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right on in all of that, actually. What I would add to it is, we're going to evolve. Culture's going to evolve. If we're right about the the further cultural movement into green, which we're orange green, so we're more fluid, more fluorescently green. That's going to be more communal. So it's this idea, what you're talking about. Well, some of the Scandinavian countries are already there, but it's this idea that all kids are our kids. This is actually an early stage thing that's brought forward in tribal cultures. The kids are often communally raised.
So this is a re-enchantment, Jeff.
It is. So yes, exactly. So these kids are precious. No kid goes hungry. Every kid's materially cared for, one way or the other, even if their parents are dopes.
Yeah. And protected from abuse and neglect.
Protected, all of that good stuff. And there has been huge progress in that. When I think of how I was raised, and not me personally, but kids around me abused and so forth. That adoption would just be more, it would just be more prevalent, because people want kids, and maybe, you realize at some point, I want to raise a kid and I want to have a kid, and I have what it takes to raise a kid. You don't want to necessarily have your own kid. I mean, I just think that we will be surprised at some of the ways that this moral evolution continues.
I agree. Yeah. And we've seen it already. We've seen it with my two daddies and my two mommies.
Yes.
We've seen that. We've seen it with 26% of the kids in schools have a single parent.
Yes.
And also there's been somewhat more help for single mothers, but they're still the most poverty-stricken group in the country.
Totally. No.
Which but and so it's easy, for me, it's easy to look at the things that are going wrong. Well,
you're a little more in the trenches too, Keith. I have to sit here and think. You have to actually deal with people who are in crisis all day long.
That's true. Not that my clients are all in crisis. I mean, generally, after people start working with me, they're really progressively less in crisis. I mean, that's part of it. Yeah. I worry less about the people that I'm working with and more about, everybody else, myself. Because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, fair
totally down.
enough. Yeah. No, no,
But
the
yeah,
culture at large. But so I would also then, so I'm thinking about, what's that next stage of moral development where this, both of these things are taken into account, the humanity of both. And then I think, so how do we progress politically, and I'm not so sure that that it won't be fruitful. It will be definitely fraught and full of fighting,
yeah,
but for states to do their thing. And that is the way. See, right now there is a whole contingent of people who, so much of this is performative, where these anti-abortion, wearing guns on their thighs, that kind of thing, where they just want it their way. And also, I would say that's also true of the left with the performative nature of gender fluidity.
yeah, in your face,
That is
in your face,
calculated to
yeah,
calculated to offend the other side.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So this umbrella, this 50 states thing, we developmentally, we have about half the population is traditional modern, and red traditional modern even, and half the population is Scandinavia. If we were just the top half of the United States, we'd be Scandinavia, for God's sakes.
That's right.
you know
Well, so
so
first of
maybe
all, I agree with that. But there's a problem with it, okay? And maybe it's an inevitable problem, okay? Well, it's like the 25 states that have passing laws that the legislature can overturn the electors if there's some problem. Okay, so all right, so they do that, and then there's an election, and then some state tries to do it, but everybody's super meticulous about votes now because everybody got all paranoid because. And Republicans are the ones that are much more likely to cheat anyway. So, okay, so it goes to the Supreme Court. I don't think this Supreme Court is going to allow, I don't know, Arkansas or Missouri or whatever, to overturn without credible evidence of any kind of voter fraud, which there won't be. I think it'll stop there. Okay.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that with gender stuff.
Can I just talk about that regarding that issue too, because I think you're touching on something that Integral really helps us with. It's like, a center of gravity modern country is not going to just become fascistic. There's just too many things that are playing against that, including, well, the Supreme Court's one of them, as you just said. The other one is Georgia just reelected Brad Raffensperger.
I know.
The guy who was the nemesis of Donald Trump and wouldn't recount the votes. They just reelected him.
Stood up to the president. That guy, a conformist Republican, stood up to the president.
Yes.
Good guy.
I
might disagree with everything else.
I trust the center of gravity of individual people, that they're not going to come up and hit me if they're mad at me, for instance. And also cultures, are there extraordinary events where, a meteor hits or Russia invades you, or, you're attacked in a dark alley? Yes. And earlier stuff is called for. But, we can trust the centers of gravity of consciousness and culture.
I think we can. I'm hoping we can in countries where it becomes deeply embedded in the unconscious. I'm looking at Poland now and Turkey that are shifting towards fascism. They might make it all the way. Certainly Russia did. They had an election way back in the 90s. It was a real election, and it's been towards. So I think that's true. The thing that bothers me now, one of the other good things about states is that this is one of the reasons that Europe developed so quickly. Guns, germs, and steel. All where did the technological advances come most frequently? Musical instruments and weapons.
Interesting.
And so the rubbing together, that friction creates new ideas. What's hard for me, and it might be inevitable, is that the states that take away a woman's right to choose, or they take away parents and kids and medical people's rights to do what seems right for that particular kid, that don't only less than 50% of high schools and less than 20% of junior high schools hit the 16 sex therapy topics that the CDC says we should hit. And so what does that mean? That means there's going to be a lot more sexual assaults, and there's going to be more VD, and there's going to be a lot more teen pregnancies and abortions, and there's just going to be a lot of more suicides, and there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of suffering. And you know, I don't ever want to normalize anybody's suffering. I don't want to normalize one person on this planet. No. I don't want to normalize, you know, we've been doing business with China, and there have been absolutely no sanction in China for Tibet and the Uyghurs. We've normalized the fact that China can engage in cultural genocide. That's not okay with me. And so maybe that's just, you know, evolution is not a kind thing.
No, you know, and I don't want to sound condescending, but God bless you. You know, bless your heart, Keith. I mean, because I'm with you on, I want it to be a better world where everybody gets to be who they are and everybody's takes care of each other, and we live in harmony with the planet and maybe even God.
There you go.
Or, you know, emergence at least, you know, the frisky dirt got up and wrote poetry. There's something going on there that we want to be in
frisky dirt, boy.
Remember that? It's one of Ken's great lines is, you know, there's a materialist view of the dirt is basically a materialist view of the world, which is the modern view, is the idea of frisky dirt.
You know, that would be a good book.
Hydrogen atoms became us for some reason.
That would be a good book. A good book one day would be 1,000 of Ken's best sayings. Because he has 1 million of those, right?
That's a good one.
There's just one after the other. That would be fun. That would be a fun book. I don't know. Yeah. Somebody else would have to do it. Ken would never do that for himself, because you know you can't see your own best aphorisms. You know, somebody else has to see it from the outside.
And there's so many.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I guess one of the things I was going to respond to is that, you know, there's both the traditionalists and postmodernists. Okay, if we're going to do, so there's moderns in between, the three big worldviews that are in contention right now. The traditionalists see a suffering in postmodernity that they are allergic to, or they don't want their kids. You know, they see,
that's right.
And also modernity. I mean, they don't want their kids to grow up not believing in God, or to be secular, or to be gender fluid, for that matter.
They also don't want their kids. They don't want their kids to know about the ugliness of the world before their adolescence. They believe that kids should be protected from
and indoctrinated
violence. Yeah,
you know, and indoctrinated to their culture, their religion. I mean, that's conformist. That's conformist worldview. That is the center of gravity. We talk about the center of gravity of the culture. That's the center of gravity of several states, and certainly several parts of, you know, of many states. I'm not sure we don't let them do their thing, you know, especially in a world where there is an umbrella intelligence and consciousness of social media, of tremendous wealth, you know, so that if there's an underground railroad that it'd be an overground railroad. It's like, you know, and at some point we're just going to be fighting these worldviews out.
That's right.
You know, we just are. There's no way. You and I talk about this all the time. The other side of that is we friend our way through these things. We just keep, you know, in each other's hair. We learn about each other, and so we have the pendulum swings, but we have the clock moving. There is, the whole thing is moving towards goodness, truth, and beauty, I think.
I agree, though there's another variable that I want to put into those three worldviews, okay?
Yeah.
The other variable is that red consciousness, pathological red consciousness, exploits amber and orange to gain leadership and power roles.
I would say that's true, and I would include green with that. Red infects all three.
I think it does, but I think green has more antibodies to.
Not if you look at the militant, lefties.
Yeah, but come on. The militant lefties are basically limp militants, and the militant righties are scary as hell. Okay.
Well, that's the view from the left. I'll give you that.
How many left wing people have shot anybody in the last 20 years that you and I know about? I really can't think of one. Okay, can't think of one.
I wouldn't.
I can think of hundreds where right wing people kill people.
There's no question that the right wing political violence, the political violence is primarily right wing right now. It was, I would point out, primarily left wing in the 60s.
That's right. That's
right. You're right. That's
also
we can notice that. I mean, I noticed
CEOs have 3 times. If you take all the CEOs, there's 3 times more psychopaths in CEOs than in other professions. Okay, yes. If you took politicians, I suspect if you could actually measure it, they're never going to let you do it. There would be 5 or 10 times more psychopaths in the general population.
How could there not be? I mean,
look
at what they have to deal with.
That's really
and what if they cared about what other people felt and thought?
That's a good
I mean, they get nothing done.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's.
I did that one episode a while back, and then, that actually psychopathy is something we're also wrapping our head around in terms of there are people who are on that spectrum, and actually they can play a role. You got to watch them like a hawk. But anyway, go on. I'm sorry. Am I over normalizing psychopathy?
Yeah. Just because. No, maybe you haven't had to go head to head with psychopaths in your life much.
Just Trump.
Yeah, Trump's toxic.
I went head to head with him for way too long. But
toxic narcissism and the psychopathy. I personally have had to deal with psychopaths. Evil has existence. A human being hurting another human being for gratification, personal gratification, is evil. Those people are scary as hell, and need to be externally constrained and have brain damage. Their brains literally are compromised in their empathy circuits and their self-reflection circuits and their impulse control.
Yeah.
But so, Putin, and by the way, you take somebody that has some of those characteristics and you give them the kind of power that Putin has, and then it amplifies it. And then they start doing things like Trump did. They start blowing people up. If Trump didn't blow people up the first year, the power began to get to him, and he found out he could blow people up, and he started.
Who did he blow up? Who did Trump blow up?
He blew up that general in Iran. Okay.
Well, okay.
Blew that guy up, and whoever was around that guy.
Yeah. And we've been blowing people up. I mean, if I had to argue, Trump's foreign policy was let's blow up fewer people.
Well, I think that was
than Obama.
It was the one thing I liked about him. Also, he told his Secret Service guys, because apparently he had a horror, you've seen this, of being hit in the face with a pie like Bill Gates. And so he told his Secret Service guys, if anybody has a pie, I want you to beat him up.
Yeah, he's.
Anyway, he's everybody's.
I'm not defending Trump. I'm just saying.
I know you're not. I know you're not defending, but man, you're right about. A psychopath that has a code. Okay, Dirty Harry. Okay, so psychopath who has a code.
I like that.
Yeah, and now the problem with that particular code is Dirty Harry. I'm sure if we looked at all 4 or 5 movies, some of the people that he killed probably didn't deserve to get killed.
I think he probably evolved in 5 movies, didn't he?
Yeah, well, he did somewhat. I mean,
just kidding.
Yeah,
probably not. And clearly there's, we could have this distinction of people who are literally brain damaged. I mean, if you think about the first of the shooters was Charles Whitmer, I think was his name. He went to the University of Austin back in the 60s, went up to the bell tower.
Yeah, the bell tower guy.
The co-eds, I don't know how many killed. But it turned out he had a brain tumor on his amygdala or something.
Oh
And
man.
he had been trying to get help for months because he had these violent impulses. I mean, that would never happen today. People, maybe it might very well happen today, but we have so much more in place where people can, if they want help, they can find it.
That's true.
There was nothing then, nothing.
And there's the red, the red flag laws and stuff. And now here we go. Now we're beginning.
But I'm talking about he was voluntarily help me. I am
and wasn't
losing
help.
control here.
Yeah, and so that brings us back to social democracy, where if somebody asks for help, you give them some help. Now we're talking about remodeling our entire medical system and remodeling our entire social welfare system. And yes, we have models where everybody's happier. In accepting gender diversity, the Netherlands are number 3 in terms of the third best in the world. The United States isn't even in the top 40. The United States. And this is where I think I suffer somewhat from being world-centric. It's easy for me to get pissed off at the United States and forget about the fact that the United States has a constitution that I have a lot of affection for. And in general, this is a great place to live, even though you're more likely to get shot here than pretty much any other place in the civilized world. That I have to kind of work to have a healthy nationalism for the things about this country that I'm proud of. Because I'm so focused on the things that piss me off. And if I forget about the things that I'm proud of, then I become ineffective as an agent of social change. Here's another thing that I'm proud of in this country. Everybody has their opinions about trans and about gay and lesbian and everything, okay? But 90% of people in this country, if they're face to face with somebody that they don't like that group, they'll be pretty nice to them and polite to them. And if they find that person by the side of the road with a flat tire in the middle of nowhere, they'll help them out.
Yes.
America is good. Maybe that's a human thing, but I know it's an American thing, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud when it gets to a personal level. It's like that.
Hang on here. What part of "Do Not Disturb" do you not understand?
But it's important. I'm important. I'm important enough to disturb you.
I know. I have spam for you. Well, yeah. I mean, Keith, it's interesting, because, again, God bless us. My roots are from the right. I feel like I've been a tremendous traitor to my roots, but they're there. I get that view. I do. And you come from the, just sort of naturally.
I come from the left.
Yeah, the left, and there's the gratitude and the grievance story of America.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're both true.
They're both true.
They're both true. And
everybody gets
America is its own thing. America is its own country. We have this tremendously unique history, and so does every culture in a way. And if you go back 100 or 200 years, show me the culture that was humane.
Well, also
I'm open, but I don't know of one.
Show me the culture in human history.
Yes.
That basically said to everybody else, it's not okay with us if you invade your neighbor.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm really proud of the United States for that.
That was the way of things.
The last 30 years, a lot of the peace of this world is because they're scared that the United States will come kick your ass if you go, take over this poor country next to you.
Yes.
Now, let's bring it back to there's one thing I wanted to ask. And I wanted to ask you about this, okay? Because you came from conservative roots, wanted to play with girls when you were a kid, and grew up discovering you were gay in a culture that was a homophobic culture. Moving forward to the present moment, and that culture really tried to take away your choice to be gay to a certain extent. If you decide
there was no choice.
Yeah, there's no choice.
Yeah, so it was taken away, I guess.
Yeah, and so that leading into now, women are not going to have the choice to have an abortion, or maybe trans kids are not going to have the choice to pursue their trans interests. How does that fit with your lived experience, going through what you've gone through over the last 70 years? How does that?
Yeah. Well, I think that they should have that choice, is the bottom line.
Yeah.
And I think it should be a far more considered choice than it is in either case right now.
Yeah,
Actually.
there you go.
And I think we've talked about that. I think
Yeah,
that was part of the theme of this episode, if you will,
yeah.
is that bring way more consciousness into these decisions, and you have the right to make them.
And now we're beginning to look at maybe a common value for the future, for everybody.
There you go. I'm on board. Keep going.
Well, that if the common value is if something is going to have consequences that potentially are not good for you or for the culture, that there's a bar of evaluation and exploration. Now, I don't think that it necessarily has to be psychotherapy. In California, they used to have a law that if you wanted to transition, you needed 2 years of psychotherapy. So a couple of guys came to me, and they were having hormonal. They could do hormonal treatment, and so they had breasts, and they were dressing as women, but they had to have their 2 years of therapy before they could do sexual reassignment surgery. And both of them were in their. One was in their 50s, one was in his 40s, and we only had a few sessions because I don't want somebody coming to see me so that they can check off a box. It was a well-meaning law, but the law of saying you need to go into psychotherapy for 2 years before you get to make a decision as a grown-up person, psychotherapy really wasn't the right thing to mandate. Now, if they would have mandated, you needed to take this course that we have on gender, we need to take this course on the pluses and minuses of hormonal treatment and sexual reassignment surgery. You need to talk to people that have done it and were happy with it. You need to talk to people that have done it that weren't happy with it. And after you jump through those hoops, after you raise that bar, then make your decision. Yeah. That would have been a much better law. But, California was trying to do something like that.
Yeah. Totally.
I think
it's a stage in the path.
So then I think that might be a common value in the future, perhaps. It's something that brought us together.
In some ways, that gets to what I'm talking about as you become more conscious of these decisions. But this is also a cultural thing that happens under its own power. What has happened now in the last 10 years, it's not that long, is this trans realization. It's a capital R realization of gender fluidity that I totally 100% approve of, has come on, and of course it comes on with fanaticism, and it thinks it's the only correct worldview, and so so that's the thesis. There is now an antithesis arising to that. Of course, there's that just basic resistance to it, but there's also a considered.
There you go.
A considered antithesis, which is just saying, hey, wait a minute, this is medical for the next, you're going to live 100 years, whatever. You're a kid also. I mean, there's things we don't let kids do that adults, and I think this is messy. I don't know that there's one right answer to it, but the more that's in the culture, the more the culture's holding, the more that's on social media, the more kids are able to let both of these in, the more parents and clinicians and politicians are able to let both of these in, which is happening. I mean, it's happening at a breathtaking speed, Keith.
It really is. I love that.
Evolution is beautiful, but not pretty. I mean, and this is like a perfect example of it. So there's that. There's also this thing that I sort of play with, is, we have these ages of consent, or, where you can do things at a certain age that you can't. And I'm not sure we ought not add a new 25 or 26 to this.
Like
where after that, you're on your own. You can do whatever you want. You
like rental
even guns. It's like under 25, you ought not be able to walk into. What part of a well-regulated militia allows a kid on his 18th birthday fucking 18th birthday to walk to a gun store and get 2 automatic weapons.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Oh
that's a
yeah.
plain reading of the Second Amendment. It's outrageous.
Oh yeah.
Whatever. Anyway, I just did another show on it. It's like,
Well, I know you did, and I'm glad that you did. And wow.
here's the thing that is true. There's two true things about the world. It's fucked up.
Okay, good.
And second, it's less fucked up than it's ever been.
I agree with that.
Both of those things are true.
And that comforts me in this age, because
Yes.
right now, I have a feeling that and I've been saying this the last year, it's going to get worse before it gets better, and it has been getting worse. And I have faith that it's going to get better. But also, I think conversations like this are really important.
Yeah.
It's
not to mention fun for the conversers. I love you, Keith.
Oh,
you're my bro for way back, man.
Yeah, I love you, Jeff. You're my standard. Yeah. Like Becky and I are talking about social standards. I said, well, top of my social standards, how I feel when I hang out with you and when I hang out with Jeff.
Yes.
Those are my two, like the highest bar.
Right back at you, man. And I like that we can not only friend our way forward, but we can fight our way forward.
Oh yeah.
Because that's fruitful.
It matters to me. This is an interesting dynamic with us. If you disagree with me about something, my first reaction to that is I have a blind spot, because I trust your judgment. And I've been right almost every time with that. There'll be some part of Keith, and it's an egoic part. The part basically this is my fascist. I got a lot of Dirty Harry was my favorite movie for years. It was my favorite.
Mine was Funny Girl. So there you go.
And so the part of me that starts getting hostile and that kind of stuff, I go, that's Keith, that's your Dirty Harry, remember what that means.
Yeah. Well, you just described the war of development.
Yeah.
Every worldview it's just self-evidently true that this is the way things are. And where are you coming from? What the fuck's wrong with you? And you're a threat to me, and I demonize your worst behaviors, and I justify my own. And welcome to the war of development.
Well, this is one of the great things about working with couples, forever, whatever, 30,000 sessions. It's always like that with couples. A couple comes in, it's always like, she's wrong, I'm right. He's wrong, I'm right. And
he's not only wrong, he's bad. He must be stopped. He's evil. He must be eliminated. There's a whole cascade. It's not hard to do.
Oh God, I can't.
And we do it culturally too.
Oh God, God. A million times. And my job is to understand the beautiful, good, and true of each one of them, and then weave it together with them into a shared understanding. And people who want to do it can always get there. If somebody doesn't want to do it, they can't. But both people want to do it, they can always get it.
I think let's transfer that to the culture. I think that's true with the culture too. When we get to this integration where we can accept the best of each and have this new synthesis and integration, but do we want to? It's like your couples.
Well, I'm trying.
Yes, no.
I am really trying to do that with conservative core values. I really am.
Yeah.
And you help with that. And also not trusting my own. Like I listen to my outrage, but I don't quite trust it.
Man, that's well said. I like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in sort of not just outrage, but everything. I mean, all my reactions.
Yeah.
All my self-evidently true principles.
Yeah.
Except for, and I always love this from another one from Scott Peck. He said, this line you often hear, all great truths are truths whose opposite is also a great truth. And he said, except for one exception. And that is that love makes the world go round. And that's, if you, in all of the consternation, try to find the part that's loving,
I completely agree. You know, at the core of all the work I've done and all the psychotherapy and all the books and everything, the core of that is that love heals. That's it. That's the organizing principle of my life, really.
Yes.
It's and I have there's a lot of data around it, but I don't need the data. I have great faith that love heals.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we stop with that today?
Oh my God, I feel healed in this moment.
Well, and now
I do. I actually literally do. So thank you.